Ladies and gentlemen, just before we start another episode of the Fitzness Academy podcast, just a reminder for those who are listening on YouTube that we are now on Spotify. So please head down into the link in the description and check us out there. On with the episode.
What do you want to do? What do you want to achieve? What kind of approach do you want to do? What things light your soul on fire? Just be really true and honest with yourself and follow that. And even though, yes, a lot of it can be quite difficult and quite anxiety inducing, you know, I went from dropping out of university to then going on live TV multiple times a week. I didn't think I could do that transition because it was terrifying and it's really anxiety inducing. But I know now that putting myself in those places of discomfort, leaning in discomfort, challenging myself because they were worthwhile and because they truly aligned with what I wanted to do and what I wanted to put out there, I think that's why I'm doing what I'm doing and I'm having the opportunities that I'm having and I'm able to kind of grow subsequently to that. So just be honest and be kind to yourself and do what you want to be doing and focus on you for goddamn sake, because we do too much to kind of please other people and it gets boring after a while.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Fitzness Academy podcast. Now, this is quite a unique one to film because only a few episodes ago I had a dietitian on, Renee McGregor, and now I've got an unbelievable human being to speak to now. So Lara Rebecca is the host of the Keep Smiling podcast. So a little bit of a snap here. So two podcasters together should make a good one, hopefully. I'm sure it will be. An anorexia survivor, and it's really important to sort of highlight the latter one there, mental health campaigner. So welcome to the Fitzness Academy podcast, Lara.
Thank you very much for having me.
No worries. So, icebreaker question. Everyone loves a childish question to start with. So this was a difficult one. Again, not a lot of people that I'm having on give a lot away. It's a tricky one. It's probably the most difficult question I have to write down. So as a podcaster yourself, if you could sit down and have one person on your podcast, dead or alive, that's a bit morbid, who would it be and why?
Muhammad Ali.
Lincoln, that was quick.
I think so. It's been a mutual kind of relationship with my dad that we've always been very fascinated by Muhammad Ali. Yes, his performance accomplishments, but his mindset accomplishments and the way that he held himself, but the way that he accomplished, the way that he, you know, just thrived within the performance setting. So much so that we have one room in my old childhood house that is literally his full poster. Oh, wow. First round, you know, the knockdown, that classic shot. So he's always been somebody that I found extremely satisfying and very, that would be an interesting conversation, I think.
Well, that's unbelievable. You've thought about that one as well before, definitely. That was a rapid answer. So almost as if we're like some GCSE English oral and you've thought about it, you've memorised it early. No, I
ran away from GCSE English as quick as I humanly could.
Likewise. I have, like, behind you can't see it, but it's like a Muhammad Ali poster there, and I think it's just the aura of the man, and you just like you almost forget that he was a professional boxer because of the sort of thoughts that and sort of way he ran about his life outside of boxing.
Definitely influenced from my father's kind of fascination by him, and then just me reading into more psychology and athlete well-being and, you know, mindset development. I think he encapsulates everything, and specifically for the age that he was developed in as well, like to be able to have, you know, that kind of awareness within that period of time is pretty incredible, I think.
Awesome. What a way to start. And another thing is, ladies and gents, is this is quite a funny one because in a lot of the guests that I'm having on, there's a lot of links to Cardiff Met University where I went, and to Loughborough as well, where I'm at the moment. And Lara is also an alumni of Cardiff Met University, aren't you?
Well, I'm a student there. I'm a staff member. Still. Okay. I'm still a student. I'm still an undergrad. I've not got a degree yet.
Okay, perfect. Anyway, so obviously Cardiff is probably my favourite city in the world. So it's great to have you on. So starting us off, this is one of my favourite things to do, is to try and pretend that I don't know you, that I've not done any research on you, or no one else has. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Obviously, from all the points that I've mentioned there, it's all yours. The floor's yours.
Oh, gosh. See, too much autonomy scares me sometimes. In a nutshell, I guess. So as you briefly mentioned, I am the host of the Fitzness Podcast, which is a podcast that I set up coming up to 3 years ago. Very much appreciative of the plug. I set up about 2.5 years ago now, but that was almost subsequent to my YouTube channel and my blog. So these are all online platforms that I had utilised and built from the age of 17, 18 years old as a way for me to document my recovery from anorexia nervosa, depression and anxiety disorder. So I had a combination of some really lovely illnesses as a child and, you know, went through some pretty turbulent experiences and challenging kind of processes. But now I'm definitely within the mindset of trying to utilize the experiences in a way that's positive and facilitative and uplifting. I've gone through something that was pretty traumatic. I've gone through things that have been difficult and have been really challenging to overcome. So why not now utilize those experiences as a way to facilitate others, to educate others, to raise awareness, to kind of destigmatize the conversation circulating mental health, to kind of destigmatize so much of the incorrect stereotypes that associate to eating disorders. So I think now I'm just on the trajectory of trying to utilize what I've been through in a way that can be positive and constructive and educational.
From my point of view, obviously, I'm obviously thankful enough, and you know, I'm very, very aware of the fact that, you know, I've never suffered from any sort of eating disorder. I'm going to say eating disorders very, very lightly because when I do all these research about it, I'm a strength and conditioning coach or aspiring strength and conditioning coach. So obviously in my undergraduate, I did a basic amount of nutrition and subjects surrounding it. It's always, I find it quite sort of disrespectful to those suffering from it to almost call it a disorder, because it, in a certain way, it's, you know, no one says, oh, I want to have this, or I want to have this form. It's almost it occurs, and it's obviously, it's a way of dealing with life, I suppose. No, things happen which we don't want to, I don't know what's the right way of saying it, we don't want to have. But can you sort of give us your perspective as to sort of...
So it's absolutely a subsequent of another issue. Well, it was specifically for me. You know, I struggled with anxiety, I struggled with depression, I struggled with low self-esteem, with kind of chronic perfectionism. What initially was just me trying to be a high achiever at school became really debilitating. You know, lost a lot of confidence socially, was hiding away, wasn't socializing, kind of lost the characteristic of me being, you know, the goofy, fun outgoing, you know, musician, hockey player. And I just became very isolated and very insecure. And then as a subsequent, more of a coping mechanism, kind of developed the disorder tendencies towards food in my body, which then, as time continues, just becomes a bit more addictive and a bit more, you know, the behaviors become a bit more chronic. The behaviors develop, your kind of identity molds and morphs into it. So it's definitely something that kind of happened chronologically. It's not just you wake up one day and you decide to dedicate your life to these disordered behaviors. It's something that has come alongside that kind of unstable platform. You know, you're already struggling with confidence, you're already struggling with depressive tendencies, you're already struggling with panic attacks and anxiety attacks and stress and just all these difficult things in your mind, that it just became the next chapter because of those other things.
That's what I was trying to get to. I butchered it a hell of a lot there. The point I was trying to get at was sort of, obviously it didn't pop out of nowhere. You know, did you possibly, and we can talk about sort of maybe the mental health side of it a little bit more, because it's possibly a little bit more well known to everyone in today's society, whereas sort of the anorexia, you know, sort of issue in that sense, did you sort of notice that as sort of the mental health sort of, not diagnosis, but as it was sort of becoming a little bit more prevalent? Probably that's the best way of saying it.
I guess, okay, well, for me specifically, and that's one thing I will have to say, mental health conditions are so multifaceted, so individualised. So when I'm saying that my story, it's very individual. Whether people can relate or not is up to them.
Okay.
But for me, once you're in the mindset of anorexia, in the mindset of this chronic eating disorder, you don't necessarily associate it as an illness, because it kind of transforms into your identity. You know, you lose Lara and you become anorexic, and your day-to-day life is dictated by these disordered routines and habits and sequences and rituals, whereas you don't kind of recognize it as something external. You recognize that as just, this is just who I am. This is just what I am now. So it really does become who you are and what you kind of commit your days to.
That's an unbelievable way of putting it, and I think you've summed it up perfectly in that sense. So onto a little bit of a brighter note, obviously because I wanted to get onto this as quickly as possible, because I think this would take up a little bit more of the time. So you mentioned that you're an anorexic survivor, and that's one thing which I see a lot, you know. Is that a way of expressing how severe it is sort of long term, rather than just saying you are a sufferer of anorexia?
Well, it's also kind of in lines with my ethos. I don't want to be consistently looking at the negatives, because fundamentally the topics of anorexia, depression, anxiety aren't necessarily the most lighthearted.
No.
And I don't want to give them the power of thinking that I suffered it. I want to kind of change and flip the dialogue and translate it into something more uplifting, and thinking survivor, and thinking growth, and thinking adversarial progression and development. So that's the kind of terminology that I like to use.
It almost
and I feel like what aligns with my brand as well.
Can you almost sort of, do you relay it back to how you sort of use past experiences as sort of benefits for you to be able not to make those same mistakes again? I obviously know that there's completely different severity and a completely different way of doing things, but is it a case of you looking back on it being like, no, look, you know, what's happened to me in the past has made me into the person I am today in a certain way?
Oh God, yeah. But I think that's kind of survival mode for everyone who's been through some sort of challenge. You know, at the end of the day, you can mourn it, you can always have this negative connotation towards it, you can always be in this mindset of, you know, looking down and it being just really negative and kind of hurting your soul. So if it's still something that's highly prevalent in your life, why not translate it? Why not change the script? Why not flip it and think, okay, what happened was kind of crap. Can't change that. But what we can change is the perception we have of said situation. Granted, it can be, you know, as you say, individualized for everyone, the severity. But if you can kind of see the growth-provoking elements of it, it makes it easier. It makes it lighter. I'm not going to stand here and think I'm so pleased with everything that I've been through, because some of it was really difficult. And I do look back and I think, you know, I have those moments of rationalization and realization, and those moments when I am feeling a bit more fragile, I'm feeling a bit more vulnerable, and I think back and it really is troublesome. It really is kind of difficult for me to kind of comprehend. But more often than not, I just try to think, well, fundamentally, I would not have been here without it. And that's the most corny, you know, stereotypical, cliche statement. But I know where I am today, the people who I have around me, the people that I don't have around me, the situations that I've been provided, the opportunities that I've been given, the people that I've been collaborated with, the things that I've had the opportunity to complete and do and achieve, has all become subsequent to me flipping that switch and changing that dialogue and utilizing the previous experiences. So again, it's not something that I'd wish upon my worst enemy, but it's something that I can see the advantageous elements of too.
It allows you to then sort of relay that message, like you said, across to others who may possibly not have the confidence to sort of come out with the fact that they may also be suffering it, but also maybe the people that don't actually realize that they are suffering it from it as well. No? Yeah,
absolutely. As I said, with the anorexia, sometimes if you're in that rut with mental health, you're in that rut with whatever condition it is, you can't see it out, and it's really difficult to look from an external perspective. So hopefully with raising awareness, with public speaking, with advocacy work, it's kind of just maintaining that dialogue. It's maintaining that conversation that we need to have, even though it can be uncomfortable sometimes. It's about making those conversations lighthearted and easy, because there's always a pause. There's always a hesitance when it talks to mental health, because it's difficult to talk about. So, well, no, we have components of physical health. Mental health is just another thing. Why is there so many kind of confrontagious, why are people not comfortable in speaking about it? So it's just about having an open dialogue. We can talk about an injury. We can talk about somebody, you know, injuring their ACL. Fine, cool. They go into the rehabilitation process and they return. Why not think about mental health in the same way? Okay, so we're having psychological imbalances. We're not feeling that great. Our emotions are a little bit skew-whiff at the moment. You know what? We're going to seek support. We're going to, you know, do these skills and these, you know, different interventions to be able to support our mental health, and we're going to become better after it. It's the same concept, but it's so much more difficult for people to talk about.
How was your recovery process then? Because I love that little analogy that you used there, almost like an ACL injury and why
it's obviously I'm a sports psychology student. Yeah. I'm always finding the connotations.
I love it, honestly, because like, myself personally, I'm not very book smart. That's probably the best way of saying it. But you practically apply it, or you apply it to a sports scenario, and I'm there and I'm with you. So, like, for you, what was that recovery process like? Or obviously, I'm aware of sort of how you sort of your treatment started, but how was it for you? Or sort of from your point of view, how sort of was that recovery process? How did it start? How was the diagnosis
It's not
given?
a thing that like starts and ends.
Yes, yeah, okay.
It's just a thing that becomes there. It's really difficult, because I think people want the black and white, and there is no black and white when it comes to mental health. And I think the difficulty is, specifically with my eating disorder, I did struggle with disordered eating tendencies and bulimic tendencies for quite a while. But that didn't really mean that my weight fluctuated that much. It was just kind of stagnant. And because I was having more mental health, complexities that didn't necessarily immediately have any physical consequences, it wasn't getting recognized and it wasn't getting appreciated as something severe. So getting a diagnosis and getting support emotionally kind of took far too many years in a way. One, because I was in the mindset of, I need to hide this. I need to keep this a secret. I need this to be my own little comfort blanket. I don't want anyone else intervening because they mean that it'll take it away from me. They'll take my comfort blanket away from me. They'll take my coping mechanisms away from me. But when I was in, I think it was like GCSE year, I sought a counsellor in my high school just to regulate my stress, regulate my academic anxiety, because it got to the point where I was running out of classrooms on a daily basis. I was always very uncomfortable. I felt very isolated. I felt very, I put myself into this isolated position, so I just wasn't thriving. So I sought kind of support from that side of things, not necessarily about the eating disorder. And it was her that recognized my disorder tendencies to speak about my body and speak about food. And it was a few days following that I had a GP referral and then got the diagnosis of anorexia nervosa, even though that was about 5 odd years into me not feeling great regarding, my emotional and psychological health. So there is definitely a stigma that you only have an eating disorder if you are, minuscule. But fundamentally, you can be any weight, you can be any shape, size, any ethnic background, any gender, any age, and struggle with this. But unfortunately, I got it a bit too late in a way, that the ball and the momentum was always already going, and it was more, in the best case scenario, you want to implement those preventative mechanisms, and it was kind of past that point now. So the treatment started from there, but it was more scary because, again, the doctors and everyone that wanted to intervene were the bad guys, because they wanted to take something away from me. I wanted this because this is who I was, and they wanted to strip it away from me. So that kind of increased my stubbornness, my secrecy, my commitment and dedication towards the illness too. It was quite a few years before it kind of clicked for me that, I need to get better, because you're so engulfed within the identity of anorexia. So it does certainly take a while.
Was there a certain point where, when it became so, I guess the best way of saying it is normal to you, did you almost feel like it wasn't sort of any difference when you actually sort of got the diagnosis? Or was it like, oh, all right, cool, I'm suffering from this now, I didn't actually realize it was this bad?
The diagnosis was validation, but then it also gave me more motivation to keep going, because I felt like I needed to prove the label. Mm-hmm. Because now I was given an official label, I was like, now I really need to make sure I commit to this now, because it's official. Yeah. And it's not something, when I was in that mindset, that you want to get better from, because you're so addicted to it. It's something that you relate to. It's you. And alongside that, I'm researching Pro-Ana and Pro-Mia websites, which are really unhealthy platforms where people share advice on how to lose weight, on how to commit to an eating disorder. So you're really dedicated, you're really committed, you're really transfixed. So getting the label and the diagnosis, although, yes, it kind of started the conversation, it also inhibited my recovery, because it only made me more determined and more motivated.
Was it a case of then proving yourself right in a way that you can do this, or proving others wrong in terms of the global stereotype towards having anorexia?
It was more just about me. Like it was never about proving to other people. It was an internal battle. I think a lot of people assume that, okay, you have anorexia because you want to, lose weight and look like this person or said this person, but there's so many underlying complexities that people don't understand. And it was just the addictive tendency that I had within, and because I developed it for so many years, that was just the next step.
And you mentioned an interesting point in regards to how anorexia isn't the only sort of or the only sort of stereotype to having an eating disorder. That it comes in all not shapes and sizes, but it comes in all sort of facets and different way of thinking it. Rini mentioned it in the fact that something that she's quite close with, and in her book Orthorexia, is it's a case of having to feel like you need to be perfect with your diet. I absolutely love food, so I absolutely love going out with my family and having something to eat outside. It doesn't mean that it's in that way, but do you almost feel that you were not stigmatized, but because it was probably more well known than others, that it was more difficult to sort of recover from?
Not necessarily. It doesn't help that I am the elite stigma. I'm talking about mental health awareness. I'm trying to, break down the common misconceptions. And I was a privileged young teenage girl with anorexia. It doesn't paint a good picture first for the kind of thing that I want to be talking about. But then I do have the empathy. I do have the understanding. It didn't inhibit with my recovery, but I guess what I'm trying to say is it wasn't really the outside world. It was such an internal battle. The outside world was a facilitator in the end, because that's what made me notice everything that was missing and everything that I was losing. Okay. Because I was so isolated and I kept myself hidden away because I wanted to commit to these illnesses, because I was depressed, because I was anorexic, because I was struggling with so many anxiety attacks. I just hid myself away, and that was my safety. The outside world was the exciting thing that I could explore following recovery. And when I went through the process of re-identifying, when I understood that I didn't have to associate myself to anorexic all the time, I could just be Lara. That helped me, because it was like, there are lovely people and lovely adventures and opportunities out there. And I know that, if I was in a position where I could speak to myself 6 years ago and say, hey, this summer you went dirt biking in Morocco, then you solo traveled around Italy and backpacked around Budapest, you experienced life. And that was the exciting thing. So the outside world was an exciting concept to me once I came towards recovery and once I was more accepting of it. Was the feeling of perfection something that sort of was also a form of recovery for you? Because I think even whether it's to do with sort of eating disorders or so other facets in life, I think perfection is something which really hurts people, because it almost feels like you have to be a certain way to be happy, which is obviously not the case, it inhibits your productivity as well. Like perfectionism can kill your productivity. I think I've always held myself to very high standards, which has been great, but also crap. Like, I related to different things. Like, I wanted to be the best anorexic I could. And then, you wanted to recover the best that you could. So it's just about having that element of realism as well alongside. But you do go through the ebbs and flows, because recovery can be really challenging and really anxiety-inducing, because you have people taking your control away. You have doctors, you have medical staff, you have people weighing you. The numbers that you wanted to see going down are now going up. Somebody else is now controlling the food that you're eating. Somebody is monitoring you. You don't have control. And then that's what kind of the anorexia was all circulating around. Is this control? But once I developed a bit more of a healthier mindset, the need to want to do well, I guess, did associate to me recovering, because I wanted to live life. I wanted to experience it. I wanted to achieve academically. I wanted to push myself. I wanted to say yes to opportunities. And I know I couldn't do that being bedbound. So that was always a motivator behind the scenes too.
Was that associated with starting your podcast in a certain way and wanting to relay your feelings, your thoughts, your experiences with others who may, or even just educating, people who may just not be aware of anorexia?
Podcast came about 3 years after my discharge. Okay. But it was the blog that was the first thing. Okay. And it was just a little creative corner in the internet where, I did do mental health awareness content, eating disorder awareness content, but sometimes I just took pretty photos of food and be like, this is what I had, or how I travelled to Rome. And I literally did a full piece about the Last Judgment and the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, because these were things that I found fascinating, and that helped me with my recovery. Even though thinking, how is that related? It made me see the world in a bigger picture. It's
not necessarily relating to the anorexia itself. It's
no, but it was about living.
Feeling.
And you don't live when you're struggling with that debilitating mental health condition. And it was just a place for me to be creative and talk about the recent challenges, talk about how I love to be outside, how, my greyhounds were great in terms of helping me with my recovery, how I challenged myself and I ran a half marathon 8 months after getting discharged. And, I did it wearing a Beat T-shirt, fundraising for the eating disorder charity that, helped me. So it was just about me rewiring my mindset and thinking about achievements and, that kind of dopamine hit that the anorexia gave me. I needed to seek it elsewhere where it was like sustainable and actually healthy. And doing life and having moments with my sisters and having moments with my dogs and with my family and teaching myself A-level maths. Yes, I'm a nerd, but I needed to put it in different places.
How did the podcast then come about from it? Because I'm intrigued, and I always love to express to how my podcast started. It's just as a form of how proud I am of it. So how did it come about for you?
So it was just a very gradual progression from the blog. I then somehow developed the balls to develop a YouTube channel. And that was where I really started becoming more vocal, because it gives you more linguistic opportunity. You're not just restricted to text.
You can express your emotions in a different way. Yeah,
absolutely. And from that kind of got very successful because of the transformation video that I posted. And then subsequently to that kind of catapulted this idea of me doing a lot more mental health advocacy, working with SLC, working with BBC, working with ITV, because I had a viral video regarding my anorexia transformation and mental health recovery. And as much as going on live TV and speaking publicly was horrendously anxiety inducing, because, a few months prior I couldn't sit in a lecture theatre without running away, it reminded me that if I do something I love, I'm not terrified and I can just feel comfortable doing it. And the podcast was something that I'd wanted to do for so long. And the more podcasts that I was invited on, the more conversations I had with people, the more it became like, I'd really like my own podcast. Yeah. But again, I'd stall. I'm like, no, I can't do it. Nobody will listen to it. But it came the lockdown, and excuse my French, but I said, fuck it. There's never going to be an opportunity when we're locked away. And I felt so isolated, so disconnected. And I was like, I just want to have good conversations with good people and happen to put it on record. And that's what the podcast is. I have good conversations with good, influential people and happen to put it on record and happen to put it up to the world to listen to. And I think that has been the most transformative element to what I do now, because that's where I thrive.
Yeah.
I've kind of paused the YouTube because you get so confronted and so lost in an algorithm and thumbnails, and then my channel got demonetized, and then this happened and that happened. It's just too much.
Yeah.
Don't want to hear about it. I want to have the long form conversations. Yes, okay, a video may get thousands of views and an episode may not get as many, but then I know the people who have taken the time to listen to that full conversation are going to take so much more value. And I've been able to relate a lot of my my story to it, but then I can take what I've learned and into other people, and we can have this collaboration and this network. And, I study sports psychology, and I was able to do a 9-part series on athlete wellbeing, and I talk with elite athletes, which also relates to it. And it's kind of helped me grow my network, expand, me as a person. I can learn so much. I connect with some incredible people, some influential 100%. Stories. And every time the call ends, that day is pretty goddamn good, because I feel so motivated, I feel so inspired, I've made more friends, and fundamentally it is just an opportunity for me to pick people's brains and just say it's for content's sake. So I just sit down and enjoy.
I feel like I'm talking to myself. I was like,
just do a podcast about making podcasts.
Exactly. Like, the facts of it, and the again, excuse my French here, ladies and gents, the fuck it sort of 2-word expression is so underappreciated, because the amount of individuals I know who either are experts in their field who can't express their knowledge, it's so wasted. I'm like, God, if you launched that, or if you did that, I would, the world would explode. But the only terrifying thing is the fact that we're going into a lifestyle and a society where we're all wanting the 5-second content, and I'm terrified of that. Sure. I want to have a 40-minute minimum conversation, and be able to go in depth with topics and truly feel inspired, truly connect, truly learn, because I know then the audience are going to take that value and that productive kind of educational lessons alongside. Comes back to learning from it, doesn't it? Because I know for a fact that when, yes, of course, a couple of my episodes have been by myself, and yes, those probably don't do as well as the ones when I have a guest on. I find myself trying to do it because I want to learn. Like I mentioned to you at the start, I kind of want to take this perception as to, I have no idea who you are. I've read one line, and it gives me an understanding as to what truly happens to someone, or how strong they are, and what life lessons they've got for me. If I can take one,
well, I found so many relatabilities and conversations. Mental health is such a huge, vast concept, and there's so many different contexts, so many individualized stories, so many different people suffering. able to have conversations with people with, again, addictive disorders or bipolar disorder or, suicidal thoughts, but how they've been able to grow through adversity, and how, you can see patterns arise, but you can see how that affected that person differently. It's just so fascinating, because then I know that my content is going to be improved as well, what I do on other platforms and when I do my public speaking, because I've had such a broader, more holistic approach, because I listen to other people, I learn, I'm able to connect, and the opportunities that I've had subsequently have been amazing. And I think it's just because it comes from more of an authentic platform, rather than it just being, Instagram and here's a picture of my face and here's a picture of my ass. It's actual in-depth content that is facilitative, and it's something that I can really be proud of. And I want to share it with people, and I feel really proud of it, and I'm able to share it with my university as well. So I know a lot of my interviews have been given to master's students for sports psychology from when I did my interviews, which is really kind of humbling.
It is, and I think experience is the big one that pops out for me as to like sports experience. Is like sort of learning is probably what pops out to me as the most important, because one thing which, again, a number in this case, which of things.
Really loud.
Sorry,
I'm drinking.
Right. I saw you sipping away from the camera.
I'm trying to say away from. Sorry, I got a really squeaky water bowl.
The learning one is what stands out to me, because if I could learn one thing from one of the guests that I have on the podcast, I'm happy, and although, my podcast don't get hundreds of millions of views and people are like, oh, that must be a terrible piece of content. And, it's about listening for those one little gems. Simon Guy, who I had on, this will be a couple of episodes ago when this podcast comes out, but he says, if you can take one piece of advice from someone, or you always walk into a room and look for that one piece of gem knowledge, you're walking out a much better person, which is one thing with that even not in the podcast, but in general. It stands out to me as a lot of what I strive for now as a human being, rather than trying to get a certain grade, to look a certain way, to be a certain, achieve something heavy in the gym or a certain goal. It comes down to sort of the nitty gritty piece of information which you're learning of someone else. Doesn't mean that you're going to automatically be like, I'm the best person in the world, but you can learn from people's experience.
Shit, that was the plan.
Right, now I've learned this from Laura, I'm going to be the most perfect individual in the world. It's not the case, because people are obviously not perfect, and this is one thing which I'm focusing on a lot more. That perfection is probably, trying to strive for perfection is going to cause more harm than actually being perfect in the first place. I think, anyway. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
No, absolutely.
And I want to get on to one or two episodes in particular which I listened to, because I do listen to Laura's podcast, by the way. That's how I got the idea, through her and another friend of mine.
Oh, what? Yeah.
So,
how did you find me?
So I had heard of your podcast, because obviously I had been to Cardiff Met before. Never got round to listening to it. When I came to Loughborough, I had a bit of spare time, and it had come about again, so I had to listen to an episode. And then coincidentally, a friend of mine from Gibraltar, or who lived in Gibraltar,
Sarah.
It's a friend of mine from Gibraltar.
Sorry.
And I don't want to say her name in case she doesn't.
I only know one person from Gibraltar. Sorry, we'll talk offline about that.
So I don't really want to throw her in the deep end in case she does what she wants to remain anonymous. But she knows exactly who she is, and she sent me a message. She's like, "You need to have this person on your podcast, or Lara, sorry, you need to have Lara on your podcast." And I was like, that's an unbelievable coincidence, because like a week before that I had listened to I don't know what number it was, but Dr. Amara Nassim, which was entitled "What Calories on Menu," which is that's my favourite one.
That makes my blood boil.
That was one which I quite loved. Apart from that one, and we'll get onto it, I'm going to expose myself a bit. The sort of student well-being debate for me was up there with probably those two as my favourite episodes, because it kind of made me understand as to how difficult it actually is to be a student nowadays. And it's not dandelion, we go to lectures once or twice a day, we come home and we've got the whole weekend off. For me personally, now being at master's level, I understand the value of actually looking after yourself and having things like this which can like distract me from, yes, I've been in lectures for 2 hours today, but I can come home and almost separate myself from that. When it comes to sort of having guests on, what is it for you which stands out, being like, right, next week, I'm going to have Dr. Mara Nassim on because I like her stuff, or is it because, no, that's actually a topic which she specialises in and we need to talk about?
It's whatever I feel is relevant at that moment and what I want to speak about. If I don't want to speak about it, I'm not going to have a guest on to speak about
Fair
it.
enough.
And it was, so my episode with Dr. Mara Nassim was because we collaborated beginning of 2021, because I featured on Steph's Packed Lunch, Channel 4.
Okay.
And that was discussing anorexia recovery. And I travelled up to Leeds, a great experience. And she was featured as well, although she was coming in via Zoom. So we maintained dialogue, knowing that, she does a lot of work within the eating disorder and wellbeing space. And it was when the government had announced that it was a legality for cafes or establishments that had, I think it's over 300 employees, that restaurants and cafes had to apply calories upon their menus, and causes huge uproars with, the eating disorder awareness community, BEAT. And I evidently wanted to rant about it on my podcast and, talk about why I don't think it's an advantageous thing, the ways and methods that should be implemented to be able to cope with the obesity epidemic, but also how, to navigate through this and the strategies for individuals who are, suffering with more of a vulnerable mindset to be able to kind of cope with this information, because going out to a restaurant, having unfamiliar food can sometimes be extremely traumatic, extremely challenging for somebody who's become very ritualistic with their eating disorder. Now we have to apply labels. Now we have to apply numbers. That's only going to make that experience more difficult and more troublesome. So yeah, I was just having a conversation with her regarding, that topic, which, unfortunately enough, I think it's going to be introduced in Wales now too as a legality, even though there are still so many establishments that already have it. You've got to be just kind of careful and turn a blind eye sometimes, but it's just about raising awareness, raising the content, because some people that may not have been influenced by eating disorder, they may not recognize it as so much of an issue, but then when you understand the true psychological component of it and how it can be really debilitating for somebody very fragile and vulnerable, it kind of hopefully raises that conversation of thinking, well, is that a really good opportunity? Is that really going to solve the issue? And just broadens that kind of perspective.
I suppose not only that, but from my perspective, coming from a place like Gibraltar where, we love our food, we have our own typical dishes which we have. Going back home to a restaurant, or maybe going and traveling like a place you're an avid traveler, I've seen as well, like going to Italy and then being like, oh, I'm buzzing to eat at this place. Oh, no, wait, I can't because their main dish has 372 calories on it. I can't eat there. How terrible is that to look down and be like, oh, can't have that now. I was looking forward to it, but I can't have it. It ruins the social element of actually having food with someone. And again, Rini mentioned it on the podcast and saying how like it actually comes down to a little bit more than what you're just putting in your mouth. It comes down to the social element, certain religious beliefs and things like that, which actually come into the equation.
Absolutely. Food is social, food is relationships, food is creativity, food is, fuel. And it's not just,
of course,
a module of energy. Like there's so much more of a holistic component with it, and the fact that we're stripping down all of the nutritional value and thinking that one simplistic number is going to determine the nutritional context of one food.
How? Absolutely
not. Like that's not going to say, okay, this is great because it has a really great source of omega-3 fatty acids. This has really good fiber to, encourage your digestion. Having this and incorporating this will really improve your gut microbiome. That's not going to say that. It's going to say this number, and you're always going to associate these numbers, which can become quite addictive to somebody with an eating disorder, because our lifestyle and our routine is more focused around these digits, and they become really ritualistic, and we become really strategic with it, and it's just going to be an additional harm. We need to see food as something enjoyable and social and creative and fun, not something that we should be scared of.
110%. And it comes back to another topic that I had on that episode where I kind of mentioned competitive bodybuilding and I'm a fan of it, of course, but in a certain way, the competitive bodybuilding and normal life shouldn't probably come into the same topic area, because I kind of called it like the Tupperware mentality, where you have these 37 Tupperwares. It's a bit of a specific number of Tupperwares, and you have your exact gram of each different sort of food group or whatever it is, and people fall into that trap because it's what they see online. And don't get me wrong, I food prep, but I food prep food which tastes bloody good, I'm not trying to blow smoke on my own ass.
You should see my spice drawer. I've labelled every single one. It's great. But also what you will not find is a weighing scale.
No, exactly.
In my kitchen or in my bathroom. No numbers.
It comes down to sort of, again, how someone feels as well. If you're full, you're probably not going to eat a little bit more food. And yes, that I'm going to preface that by saying that probably takes a bit of time to develop that. But it's just, again, about enjoy your bloody life. Jesus Christ. Have the balance as well. Have the balance as well. You know, that's one thing which I definitely make sure that I get there is, you know, you go out with a lovely meal, fantastic. You know, could you go on a walk afterwards and, you know, expel some of that? But enjoy it at the same time. Go walk with your family. I know you love your morning walks as well. I've seen your walks down the bay online as well. It looks delightful. It looks delightful.
Oh, I love a golden hour. I'm a sucker for a golden hour.
I love it. It's good. Well, I follow the sort of Dr. Alex George's podcast, Stompcast, and I actually have tried to only listen to those when I'm out on a walk to try and get the proper way of like seeing like how he means it. So yeah, on to another one, because I could talk to you for days, Laura, and like we said, we're not going to go to 5 o'clock, because if not, you know, Laura's got train to get to, still 2 hours away, but I could reach 2 hours very, very happily here. So on to a bit of a Q&A section, and this was a bit of I was very careful with this, because, you know, I got a lot of questions surrounding what is anorexia and things like that. That's fairly sort of, I wouldn't say common knowledge, but, you know, it's more sort of researchable, rather hearing it from yourself, I think was more important. So I chose two. Oh, that's a bit close to the mic. I chose two.
ASMR.
Which I chose two questions, which I thought were the best ones. And the first one is, from your point of view, what are some signs and symptoms of having anorexia? Now, I'm not going to mention who said these questions, because I want to obviously, in process of anonymity, you know, don't know if they want to be known. So yeah, that's what their question was, the first one.
I think one of the things that doesn't get necessarily appreciated is that isolation and that withdrawal. You know, for me in particular, I went from being extremely outgoing and bubbly and hyper and just that bit of a weirdo to really hiding myself away and isolating myself away. And yes, that can be associated with lower self-esteem, but that can also be, you know, a common symptom of struggling with disordered, you know, eating, because you want to hide yourself away. You want to maintain that secret. You want to keep it to yourself. So that was something for me. Evidently, that could point to many other things, but that was a symptomatic element for myself. Yeah, so it's the confidence withdrawal. It's the changing behaviours. It's the secrecy. And I guess it's just, you know, the obvious ones where, you know, if you're manipulating your food. But I think it's looking at it in a bit of a wider context and seeing the confidence diminishing, seeing the self-esteem diminishing, seeing the elements of secrecy, if relationships are becoming a little bit more tricky, if you're becoming more irritable. So yeah, that kind of encapsulates that, I think.
Perfect. I liked how it wasn't sort of the stereotypical sort of, again, looking at how you can research it. Can you Google it? Can you find it? I think that was quite a unique one where sort of it's not, like you said, not really well known and sort of more appreciated. So that's perfect. So on to the second one. I think this is actually quite a good one. I was quite proud of one of my viewers for actually writing this. It says, is it hard, and obviously I don't think they mean in disrespectful manner, it says, is it hard nowadays to see yourself growing physically and mentally as well, I suppose, knowing the perceived image of that of an anorexic individual?
Oh God, yes. So evidently in my brain, I have had a picture of myself very small. Mm-hmm. And even though I know I'm in a healthy place now, when I'm in a fragile headspace, I know, but my brain thinks, but you're bigger, you've gained weight. Although now I'm in a far better headspace, when you initially make that transition within recovery and you kind of focus on the symptomatic elements of weight loss and you restore your weight, that can be very traumatic and very confusing, because you've kind of committed your life into this shrinking mentality. Mm-hmm. And now all of a sudden you're doing the opposite and you're thinking, oh crap, I no longer have the control that I mourn and I need. Yeah. And the coping mechanism for all the other subsequent mental health conditions that I'm suffering too, it feels really out of whack. It feels really uncomfortable, because all your behaviours are changing, all of your routines are changing, granted for the better, but initially it could become quite anxiety inducing. So weight restoration and weight gain and becoming quote unquote bigger is the only thing that you can think of, can be scary. But then I know, again, changing the dialogue, changing what I perceive about it. Once I gained that weight, I was able to run a half marathon and fundraise for an eating disorder awareness charity. Once I was able to gain weight, I was able to go to the park with my sisters and take my newly adopted greyhounds for a walk around the park. Once I gained the weight, I was able to actually go into school because they weren't scared about me expending too many calories around walking the premises of school. I was able to have relationships. I was able to go on adventures. I was able, to now do all the random things that I do and hop on planes because they're cheap flights and just go and explore a city. I know that I couldn't have done that without that weight restoration and that mindset restoration. So again, it's about flipping the dialogue. Yes, initially it was like, oh crap, it's nothing that I can associate safety to. But now, because I'm healthier, because I'm stronger mentally and physically, I have so many cool things to account for. I have so many cool memories that I can scrapbook. Literally, I do have multiple scrapbooks. But metaphorically too. So I know that it's kind of emotional for me to think, because I could have easily missed out on everything that I'm doing now. And I've had the best year of my life. And nothing of that would have been possible if I didn't take the step into beginning that kind of weight restoration process.
What about aesthetically then, from a sort of, again, aesthetical point of view, where, again, you're obviously, apart from obviously you running a half marathon, after recovering, that was unbelievable. My jaw almost hit the floor actually there. What was it for you, going to the gym and seeing growth in, maybe not strength gains, because obviously strength and hypertrophy or muscle gain is a bit different, but is that difficult for you sometimes to see, I don't know, a certain muscle group looking more defined or looking bigger in a certain way?
Yeah, so initially when I started, I think first it takes you a little bit of time to kind of adjust, because you're thinking, oh, my leg isn't a stick anymore, like there's a quad. And it can be really worrying because, again, it's just the change in routine. It's the change in what you're familiar with. It's the change in identity. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm a bit wider now. But then you think, but I'm really freaking strong. But you know what? I can bench more than my mate, which is really fun. But I can squat 120. I've got the different associations now, and I'm proud of my body. And we don't need to strive towards this shrinking mentality. My body isn't a thing that I want to associate too many aesthetic connotations to, because I want to think about the experiences it lets me have, the opportunities it lets me have, the running progressions I can make, the strength progressions I can make, my development in the gym. But then it's also thinking about stability and balance and glute activation and thinking of my body holistically and not just aesthetically. This is why my training is very functional based, and I want to see how many pull-ups I can do. I want to see if I can improve my technique and coordination and calisthenic performance, and if I can do that ring muscle up. It's about what I can do and not what I look like. Every now and then, check myself out in the mirror. If there's a good bit of downlighting, I'm like, you like that. And sometimes I don't like it, and I get a bit insecure because it fluctuates, because we're human. But then I know that once I sit myself down, it's just because I've had a bad day and I want to associate to something, and then I know I put it towards my body. But then I know now to not act upon it. I kind of see the thought, I'm thinking, okay, cool, we're thinking that way. Let's not act on it. Let's utilize what we've been through and learn that we don't want to maintain a healthy dialogue towards it. We could just accept this. Okay, we'll have a better day tomorrow. We'll see how we go. So it definitely does fluctuate, but it's just about being careful about where and how I associate my body.
I love that. So I wasn't going to actually ask this question. I haven't asked it for a long time, but I think I have to, and it would be disrespectful not to ask you. So what's next for you in your life? Because
finish my goddamn degree.
What about aside from that, sort of obviously like your travels, have you got any interviews coming up, apart from this podcast, which has been incredible so far?
There's a lot of things coming up, and I'm building my brand. The podcast is going to be expanding into, I'm building up the public speaking. I've got a lot of events to, work towards. I do really want to be public speaking a lot more and connecting with people in person and not just virtually, because I hate just
Sorry about that. I don't have my studio just yet.
I mean, with like conferences and things, it's just being able to have those conversations after really facilitates that. And I love talking to people. Something's been released.
Yeah.
In the next 2 months as well. I don't know if I'm allowed to say, which I've never.
Well, you just done it now. We got inside scoop, ladies and gents, inside scoop.
There's things developing, but also I don't know what's happening next week half the time. This is the pleasure of being able to build my network, because I have so many cool people that I know, and that's come from the podcast as well, and the relationships I've got from there. I'm working around the UK with different projects, with different companies, different organisations that really align with my values. And that's only come from me being able to put myself out there. So as long as I continue to do said thing of putting myself out there, and meeting people and having conversations with people and building these really formative and productive relationships. There's no black and white. In November, this is happening, this is happening, this is happening. Again, it's going with the flow and seeing where nature takes me and seeing how the universe wants to unfold. I'm just going to keep plowing through, doing what I want to do, and keep smiling and doing all the good things.
I love that. So, on to the closing notes, because again, I could be here for hours. Has there been one or a number of individuals for yourself that have influenced you or helped you?
Yeah. And I've said it before, and I don't want to cry, but like my dad is like,
okay.
Why am I getting emotional all of a sudden?
So,
my dad is he's a special dude, and he knows it. But we have had our challenges. Yeah. But oh my god, he is so cool. He is. The thing is, we are just two peas in a pod, which is what my stepmom says. We are two peas in a pod, and. I mean, granted, right now our relationship is more focused about home renovations and going to watch the football and the rugby more than anything. But yeah, I think if you look at my WhatsApp list of like the action, it is literally just me calling my dad. So awesome. He's a special dude.
That's awesome. Now you're getting me emotional, for God's sake. Anyway, I'm a big family man as well, that's why. So now you're getting me emotional now, for goodness sake. Now we have to end the call right now. See you later, bye. No. So what about one piece of advice? This is a closing one. This is one that I love to ask, because I don't know if this would relate to yourself in anyone becoming the next Lara Rebecca. But obviously people do suffer from, obviously, a lot of people obviously do suffer, unfortunately, and it's an amazing sort of person to have on to discuss how it actually feels from your point of view. So what is one piece of advice which you would give or have to give to anyone who wants to be the next Lara Rebecca, or anyone who wants to start their own podcast, or anyone who currently is suffering from an eating disorder like anorexia?
Well, that's a lot to cover.
It all comes down to the same one, so I don't overcomplicate it.
There's a lot of expressions in my questioning phase then.
I've still got time.
I think fundamentally it comes back to being very true and authentic to yourself. It can be a very cliche statement, I understand. However, once you know what your true values are, once you know who the type of people you want to surround yourself with, once you know the people that you want to connect with, the things that you want to accomplish, and they are truly intrinsically motivated, you know you're on a good trajectory. If you're doing something in your life that is totally externally influenced, for that acceptance, for that kind of imbalanced relationship, the motivations aren't going to be truly holistic. They aren't going to be truly in line with what you want to be doing. So once you strip that away and once you become really honest with yourself, what do you want to do? What do you want to achieve? What kind of approach do you want to do? What things light your soul on fire? Just be really true and honest with yourself and follow that. And even though, yes, a lot of it can be quite difficult and quite anxiety inducing. I went from dropping out of university to then going on live TV multiple times a week. I didn't think I could do that transition because it was terrifying and it's really anxiety inducing. But I know now that putting myself in those places of discomfort, leaning in discomfort, challenging myself because they were worthwhile and because they truly aligned with what I wanted to do and what I wanted to put out there, I think that's why I'm doing what I'm doing and I'm having the opportunities that I'm having and I'm able to kind of grow subsequently to that. So just be honest and be kind to yourself and do what you want to be doing and focus on you for goddamn sake, because we do too much to kind of please other people and it gets boring after a while.
I have no words to say. What a way to finish that, ladies and gents. Honestly, this has been one of my favourite episodes without a doubt. So ladies and gents, if...
But you say that everyone.
No, false.
That's just an ego boost that you click out on every single...
It's been the best episode, guys. See you later, bye. No, but honestly, I think whenever I put myself out there and I kind of try and find an individual or topic area which I'm not very sort of knowledgeable on, I kind of figure out and finishing the podcast and doing... I feel like I'm an expert because I've almost seen sort of what they go through. So that's why I love doing what I do. So I'm going to continue to do what I do. Because I'm terrible at reading and I'm terrible at writing. So I can talk for days. As you can find out now, I'm speaking too long.
As long as you can reference correctly, it doesn't matter.
Exactly. Once I finish my degree, I'll never have to reference ever again. Trust me on that. But no, thank you so much, Lara, for coming on. Obviously, I'm going to leave absolutely everything down in the description to her channel, obviously to all the social medias, to also the couple of episodes, particularly with the exact link, which I quite liked, because I think those were the two that impacted me the most. Lol. Getting emotion. But no, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. No, I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to kind of flip the positioning and being interviewee, not interviewer.
What do you mean give you the opportunity? Thank you for giving me the opportunity, for goodness sake. No, but thank you so much, guys, and obviously thanks so much for listening. Please obviously share the podcast if you think that it's helped you, and we'll catch you soon. Take care, guys.
Thank you.